Several people have asked, what are eco-sanctions? The term is not in totally widespread use, and you're going to hear various versions of what it is. But it's basically, think of a bank shot in billiards. It is what happens when you aim in one place and end up hitting something else. And that is the simplest definition of an eco-sanction. Now, obviously, many countries feel the effects of sanctions on Russia and Russians right now. And the question is, how are these felt? How are these registered in Central Asia and the Caucasus and Mongolia? And beyond how are they registered, how do local people deal with them? You can deal with them in a lot of ways. You can work with them, you can work against them, you can work parallel to them, however. And this involves very important geopolitical and diplomatic issues and economic issues. That's our topic right now, and we're going to lead off with Aibek Artykbaev. He is, as you can read, chairman, he is Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kyrgyz Republic. It's very important to know that he is not a Bishkek native. He is from the south, from Jalalabad. He speaks all the relevant languages of the Fergana Valley. Now that's where real life is being lived in the Kyrgyz Republic. And so his observations, both on the basis of his role as a diplomat and as a native of a very interesting and complex and, by the way, gorgeous region, is very important for us. We'll start with you, and then let me go immediately then to Farrukh Irnazarov, well known to all of the CAMCA mafia, as an absolutely first-class social scientist who is now co-founder and country director of the Central Asian Development Institute of Tashkent. A very positive development indeed. He has taken the lead over recent years in making contact with social scientists around the region, which is very, very laudable. Then we'll hear from Jeffrey Schott, Senior Fellow at the Peterson Institute. Jeffrey is going to offer some, I suspect, rather provocative words on what are sanctions and how do they really function and what is their real value. So let's go right away with Aibek. You're on, sir.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, dear participants, dear guests. First of all, let me express my gratitude to organizer of this conference for the opportunity to exchange view on most sensitive issue, which has become a large-scale trend in the new emerging format of the modern world order, life under the sanctions for countries not involved in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, about its growing challenge and expanding opportunities. We are all witnessing a sharp aggravation of the global confrontation between the center of power since end of Cold War. Because of the hostilities in Ukraine, Russia has come under the unprecedented sanctions. The tragic event in Ukraine have divided the world into three parts: those who support Ukraine, those who support Russia, and those who have taken neutral position. We, like the entire world community, are deeply worried about the tragedy that happened between Ukraine and Russia. Both people are close to us. We have a common past with them, both in the period of Russian Empire, Soviet Union, and post-Soviet period. These are our brothers, the people with whom we lived together for several centuries, went through difficult trials, shared both sorrow, and joy equally, and build our life together. Therefore, we, like sovereign small states in our region, oppose any war or any armed settlement of any dispute between two countries. Day by day, the conflict is becoming global. Kyrgyzstan, like many other countries, was under the sensitive influence of this war and its consequences. We are facing serious problems with the imposition of mutual sanctions, which are already undermining our food, energy, and economic security, severely affecting the daily lives of millions of our people. Let me digress from the practical plane of the discussion, the applied sanctions policy, and I'll look at the issue from the point of view of my academic views. I think the current state of affairs has clearly shown that the international community, I think, is rapidly moving toward a new world order. Because the generally recognized principles of the Peace of Westphalia are no longer absorbed by anyone. As you know, the main principles of the Westphalian system of international relations are mutual recognition of national states' sovereignty and the equality of states, the priority of national interest, and the right of the states to demand non-interference in their internal affairs. These principles, which have gained a global distribution over time, have certainly become the foundation of coexistence in the world community. The topic I'll discuss today with you on the introduction of secondary sanctions or eco-sanctions, or whatever we call them, also show us the indirect involvement of countries that are in no way involved in this conflict and they do not intend to take one side or another. The imposed sanctions hurt not only our country, but also the economy of many countries, threatening the world community with serious economic trials. Of course, all military conflicts end one day. However, the main risk of the current situation is that markets and the political analysts may underestimate the detrimental effects of ongoing geopolitical changes. The war in Ukraine is not just another conflict, like those seen elsewhere in recent decades. It is a conflict that could escalate into real-world war, provoke a global shock in the world economy, still reeling from the onslaught of COVID-19 and the continued buildup of inflationary pressures. The shock threatens to dampen growth and drive up inflation even more at a time when inflation is affectation and unsustainable. The short-term impact of the military conflict on the financial market is already evident. Yields on safe government bonds will fall for a while and then rise after inflation is no longer pegged. Oil and the natural gas price will rise even higher, as well as the price of many other commodities, as both Russia and Ukraine are major exporters of raw materials and food products. Safe haven currencies will strengthen and the gold price will continue to rise. The economic and the financial impact will, of course, be the largest for Russia and Ukraine, followed by the European Union due to heavy dependence on Russian natural gas. But I think the United States also will suffer. As global energy markets are deeply integrated, a jump in global Brent oil prices will have a strong impact on United States crude oil prices. While a small group of energy companies will earn higher profits, United States households and business will face a price shock which will force them to cut costs. and the United States economy will experience a sharp slowdown. Those sanctions against Russia will inevitably hurt not only Russia itself, but also in other countries and the emerging markets. It is possible that Russia will respond to the new sanctions with sharp reduction in oil production in order to drive up oil price even more, which can lead to stagflation in many countries, where unemployment, inflation will increase along with a drop in production stagnations. Without going into the controversy of the sanction policy toward Russia and its approaches, I know that there is a need to discuss developing common approaches to mitigate the sanctions consequences for countries such as the Kyrgyzstan. Countries with small economies and prevents the deterioration of the socio-economic situation in our countries. We are a small country from the position of which there is little that depends in the world. But any ill-conceived decision can turn into big trouble for our people as well as for a number of countries in the world. In this regard, I'll consider it extremely important to build a negotiating platform to resolve the contradictions at the negotiating table. I express the hope that today's discussion will make a valuable contribution to the cause of peace and a mutual understanding, provide all of us with the opportunity to focus on how to collectively transform the challenges and the threats that we face into advantage for maintaining the sustainable development of international community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was my speech.
Thank you, yes. Now let's turn to Dr. Irnazarov.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me well. Good afternoon, everyone. It's actually so weird to see like so many fellows, so many familiar faces, and they're all winking, like doing some kind of face grimace, and I have to actually somehow react. And actually, I start with some visualization exercise, and after that, I'll give you $1 million idea. Okay? How does that sound? Yeah, so if you look at the geopolitics of Central Asia, you can see that now we are totally surrounded by sanctioned countries. So we have Russia is there, Iran is nearby, China is there, North Korea is not that far away, Syria is not far away. It means that just bring Cuba and Venezuela closer, and then let's get the party started, right? So you can kind of visualize what kind of environment we are currently operating in. And so this is a bridge to my $1 million advice. So if you are thinking about career pivot and you're contemplating, brooding, okay, what to do next because you are absolutely unhappy with what you do currently, I think you should embark on a new journey, go to Central Asia and become sanction specialist. Believe me, you're gonna earn a fortune because all the sanctioned countries around you, and everyone desperately seeking for advice, to make some informed decision, and so you gotta be right there, and you will claim the first mover advantage. So think about it, even if it sounds wild at this stage. And then about sanctions. So we see that there is a gloomy picture of sanctions, and especially all the sources refer to migrants that come back in big numbers, also shrinking, contracting remittances, and also logistic chains. But it's important actually to distinguish between short-term consequences and long-term consequences, because they actually require different set of toolkits, and only understanding actually how it's gonna unfold will help you actually to define your strategy. So we see that the short term is already there. So we can see there is a huge uncertainty. No one knows, the businesses are driven by short-term projects only, because they realize they cannot actually afford the luxury of a long-term projects in the current situation, because things change every day, and even every hour, so they closely monitoring all those kind of developments, but still. So it's very hard now to do something long-term with local businesses. That's just the reality. Also, we see that logistical channels, they're all disrupted, and then people don't know whether they should go away from that logistics or they should find a better way. But currently, these kind of better ways are more expensive ways. If we just jump into long-term consequences, we can see that, yes, the migration element is there. So according to estimates, there are about like 3 million Uzbek migrants in Russia. So we understand not everyone would decide to come back. But like even if, let's say, a fraction of that people come back, the local markets are unable to absorb this labor force. So that's why it's absolutely vital to see actually what you do, how you're going to deal with this particular situation. Again, logistics is there, but once you are able to overcome, you'll be better off. And then it actually, so I'm deliberately not talking about these banking issues. Now you go to any single bank in Uzbekistan, it's full of Russians and Belarusians, okay? They are all getting their credit cards, debit cards, whatever, just to tap into the international payment channels. But this will be sorted out, that's for sure. But also the problem is with the associated partner risk. So once you are doing like any type of business with any partner, you will spend much more money on due diligence to understand actually how these things function. So is there any single chance that you're gonna be facing these eco-sanctions, secondary sanctions, no matter how you name them? And this is a problem that was literally non-existent. So that's why I'm saying this associated partner risk assessment is a vital thing, and it will be a game changer in the Central Asian market for sure. But also there are also opportunities, and not so many people talk about opportunities for Central Asia in light of those sanctions. And the first one is actually Bahadur. He mentioned during his question that we see the influx of Russian and Belarusian specialists, especially from IT sector, who are actually coming in big numbers and willing to work in Central Asia. Whether it's a kind of long-term strategy or whether it's just a point they would like to actually take a position of wait-and-see position, we don't know, and no one knows. Even themselves, they don't know. But it's a perfect opportunity to capitalize, to actually help the locals also gain this kind of new knowledge, connect, and then possibly apply it and create some kind of interesting projects. In that sense, we can't deny it's a good development. So credits to the Uzbek government. They were able to immediately come up with this initiative called IT Visa, where they streamlined all the procedures, and they even go to the airport, pick them up, and try to make things work as smooth as possible. Also, in terms of short-term things, which is not reflected that much currently in literature, so much, like I said in the beginning, there's so many sanctioned countries, but also Ukraine in a dreadful situation, unfortunately. And many IFIs and also foundations, they have lots of money and ongoing projects in Ukraine, Russia, Belarus. So they have to spend this money. And then they actually rechannel this money, some of them, of course not all of this money, but some of this money to Central Asia. So it's basically kind of free money coming with you just, immediately have to come up with some wild, crazy project, and then you just have to promise that you will be able to pull it off within 6 months, okay? And so everyone is happy, they give you money because they have to give the budgets that, they've done that. All good. So, but there is no systemic approach to that. There is no systemic approach how to use this money, how to apply and what to get from that. So this is more like ad hoc type of thing, but it's definitely an opportunity. And when we talk about longer term prospects, and this brings me to a very interesting historical situation, because we endlessly talk about integration, cooperation, connectivity. You choose your own word in Central Asia, in Greater Central Asia. But we see that nothing is really happening. And so we were expecting that some trigger should be there, that this region would start gravitating within itself and start connecting itself to each other. But this is a perfect triggering moment, because now you can easily get connected without fearing that much what's going to be a Russian stake on that. Because Russia is too busy now in Ukraine. And Russia doesn't want to get involved in another conflict with another one, because it's going to be capitalized saying, okay, look, this bad boy is doing even worse things, So that's why it's a high moment where countries, individual countries, can work together, and also they are better positioned to talk to Russian businesses. They have access to Russian market and better negotiating terms, and also to use this opportunity actually to promote their own industries. And I have to say that eco-sanctions would significantly, would make a significant blow into the companies that will employ this kind of gray schemes, right? That to avoid some kind of sanctions, they would be able to work with particular Russian banks or Russian partners, and then they may face this kind of situation. But also technology-wise, so it's not only China who will be providing these kind of gray schemes, but Central Asia also looks like a spot for that. So, but not that much, except for the bank. In Central Asia, think about these eco-sanctions that we should should have a kind of systemic approach, should think how we address this and how we can actually be in charge of that or be in the driving seat. So these are the things that come to mind, but from a regional perspective, it's a great opportunity for the region to become more solid, become more cooperative, because now we have less disagreements, because we don't have this big brother who is showing up around the corner and using this divide et impera principle, and we can easily do this thing. Because if not now, what kind of triggering moment you need more? Because when someone is busy doing some nasty stuff, you should be able actually to react and use it for your own advantage. I would like to finish on this positive note and ask all of you to think through about even tiny type of project between the countries. They matter. So once you're actually able to make it happen, it may result in a spillover effect in a good sense. So I encourage all of you, sorry for I sound like a preacher now, but that's exactly what we need at this stage to understand, because this momentum will not last forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Farrukh. Jeffrey Schott.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this really distinguished panel. And the problem I have is following Farrukh, because he just gave you an offer that you can't refuse to make tons of money in the region. And then he described to you how he is going to actually make all that money by providing the insights that he just gave to you. So I will try to just add a few comments to this. It's an interesting situation. I was in the government 40 years ago, and one of the last things I did was work to try to block the construction of the Soviet gas pipeline to Europe, for fears that Europe would become too dependent on Russian gas. Well, it turns out we were right. It just took a long time to execute the strategy. And so we are now at a very difficult point, because, as the two previous speakers have said, not only do the sanctions hit the target country, but they cause collateral damage, significant collateral damage. I think the problem is a little deeper, though, than perhaps has been expressed so far. February 24th was a major inflection point for Central Asia, which will suffer collateral damage resulting from Russia's invasion of Ukraine for years to come. So this isn't just a short-term take advantage of the opportunity while Russia is not looking. There are going to be some severe dislocations in supply chains because of the sanctions over a period of time. Now, the aim of the sanctions was to maximize pressure on Russia and to impair the productivity of Russian industries that support Russian military forces. It was also meant to minimize costs to other countries, including the sanctions senders themselves, Europe and the United States. But that's aspirational. That almost never can be done. It's very hard to so target the sanctions that they have a laser-like effect and don't damage neighbors and trading partners. And this is particularly the case with the sanctions against Russia because they have been wide-ranging and in many respects unprecedented. A mix of traditional trade and investment restrictions, to be sure, but importantly, high-tech export controls that will affect the opportunities in the IT sector, and financial sanctions, including the freezing of assets of the Central Bank of Russia. Never been done before against a major economy. This has sharply constrained Western exports to Russia. It's going to have, it's very hard to do business in Russia when you can't find financial institutions to execute the transactions. But the impact will be long-ranging because these sanctions are going to have a corrosive effect on the Russian economy over time. So the opportunities that existed in the past will likely be much more limited in doing business with Russia, and therefore perhaps the opportunity to relocate some of the enterprise and activities in neighboring countries. That's the challenge. Now, the problem here is that sanctions are likely to persist. The public opinion in the United States and Europe shifted very strongly against sanctions, against removing the sanctions, and indeed in amplifying and expanding the sanctions after the invasion of Ukraine in response to the real-time media coverage of Russian military atrocities. That is not going to go away. It's going to lead to a long-term export control, similar to what we saw during the Cold War against Russia, to impair their military capabilities and degrade the effectiveness of Russian armies. The financial controls are likely to be sustained over a period of time to address reconstruction needs in Ukraine and to support for the millions of refugees that have resulted from the conflict. And it means that these sanctions, particularly the financial sanctions, are going to make it difficult and more costly to do business. Farrukh was absolutely right. The costs of due diligence have gone up dramatically because you have to be careful about who you are doing business with and who you're doing business and your business partner, who they are doing business with. So you have to know your customer and you have to know your customer's customer. And the brilliance or the deviousness of the Western sanctions is that they are not explicit in what they cover. So the ambiguity of the sanctions means that the firms themselves have to do the hard work to enforce and to be ultra-conservative in their business relationships. That puts a big damper on the types of business opportunities available. So this means you have to be careful about the individuals, the businesses, and the financial institutions that you deal with. You have to keep checking to make sure that sanctions lists that are updated sometimes daily or weekly do not include people, entities, or even ships or airplanes that transmit the goods that you were doing business with. This obviously complicates trade, investment. It complicates travel. So in some, I think the expected benefits of the Eurasian Economic Union have in many instances become liabilities. But you can make lemons out of lemonade. And so the challenge is, how can you devise a system to take advantage of the resources that you have, the expertise that you have in your countries, the expertise that is coming to your countries, to establish new relationships, less so with Russia and more so with other major markets that can provide new opportunities and more stable opportunities going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm surprised that it took to the end of the third presentation for anyone to mention the Eurasian Economic Union.
Yeah.
Could one of you give us insight as the degree to which that affects the sanction issue in your countries, in Central Asia and the Caucasus?
I may start. Uzbekistan is not officially a member of Eurasian Economic Union. It took an interesting position of observer, and I think actually that's a perfect moment to gravitate sideways from that. And what we see now that even this Eurasian Economic Union agenda is not that much strong in the narrative and rhetorics. And while it used to be a big one, and connecting to what you just said, Jeffrey, and so I wish it was true, but I think one thing that we have to take into account, that reaction to the sanctions by Russia, because it's good what we think, can be imposed and what it should, what it's supposed to do. Mm-hmm. But whether it will lead to that result for each sanction, we don't know. Because there was no good preparation in order to impose the sanctions, but it was more sometimes emotional, sometimes there was a huge pressure and things like that. And we wish it would work this way. But the resilience to the sanctions, but also the way they will be able to adapt to the sanctions, also actually paint the last missing pieces of that mosaic. Mm-hmm. Because once you realize that they adapted to something, you should come up with something else to actually close that barrier. Then they will come up with something else. So it's a never-ending story. It's like Tom and Jerry thing, yeah? And, but this is a process. And then you see that the Central Asians, when you say that we shouldn't be driven by that short-term or long-term opportunistic approach, I think you answered yourself when you said that the private sector decides for itself. So it's it's not like the government who imposes that, okay, it should be done this way. It's more about private sector always on the lookout of opportunities. So Central Asian entrepreneurial culture is incredibly entrepreneurial. Yeah? And whenever they see there is an opportunity, they're the first ones who's going to be there. So it's not like the government policy that we should do it this way or that way. And that brings me to the moment that it's about focusing on low-hanging fruits. Mm-hmm. And to me, low-hanging fruit at this stage is the aviation industry, because you cannot fly now over Russia, and if you want to fly from Europe to East Asia, then basically that's a perfect moment to rechannel that, and especially for a country like Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, to take, if not all, but at least a sizable chunk of those cargoes and any type of transportation between these two, and taking into account that it seems it's impossible to get those planes out of Russia to Ireland, or from Ireland, to claim those planes. So for Central Asians are actually better off, they can easily capitalize on that. And these are just one of the examples where low-hanging fruits are there, but it's more about to work on enabling environment, to give a chance to private sector to resolve those issues, but within certain rules. Thank you.
Did you want to comment?
No, that was great.
Yes, a little bit. Kyrgyzstan became a member of Eurasian Economic Union since 2015. This is union helps, first of all, helps to our migrants to work in Russia. Especially, it was our decision to make easily work for our migrants in Russia. Unfortunately, I will tell you that since 2015 until today, we have some barrier to export our goods to Kazakhstan, to Russia, because sometimes our members of Eurasian Economic Union, they are doing their own interest, not interest of Kyrgyzstan. Sometimes we disagree each other, sometimes we agree each other on some of the issues, but we are trying to do best. As you know, Kyrgyzstan economy depends on Russia, because we are importing all our oil and gas from there. We are importing 95% of our needs, domestic needs, we are importing from other countries. So we are trying to use this Eurasian Economic Union to our national interests.
This has been slightly confusing, certainly to me, maybe to you as well, because we're talking about two really separable issues. One is the specific impact of sanctions on secondary countries. That's our stated topic. And the second is the general impact of the war and the war's impact in Russia on these countries. Can you give me, I'm sure no one's taken the time to calculate this, but give us your estimation, or anyone in the hall, give us your estimation of the relative importance of what these two things. How much are you really talking about the pain of secondary sanctions? How much are you talking about a general breakdown in your economic relations with Russia that is not necessarily connected with sanctions? Your thoughts?
That's a valid question. And
Thank you.
Anytime, Dr. Starr. So the point is that I think you're right. We are mostly looking at the war in Ukraine and its consequences, basically. Consequences for Central Asia, consequences for Caucasus and Mongolia. Afghanistan is there as well, but with Afghanistan, so the war in Ukraine changed the focus from Afghanistan to Ukraine. And it's not that much about sanctions themselves. So if you go to Central Asia, so people don't talk too much about sanctions themselves when it comes to the countries, to individual countries in the region. They talk about sanctions only when they talk about Russia, who is right, who is wrong. Depends what they're watching. If they're watching Russian television, they always talk about like how counterproductive they are, and they are not bringing anything bad to Russia, and Russia is strong enough to be able actually to tackle this issue. But when you talk about particular players from the private sector, that's a different story. They say, this part of sanction somehow touches upon my business. And I would like to actually explore what can I do.
Okay,
Yeah.
I want to interrupt you there. We have plenty of people in this room with direct experience of exactly what we're talking about. I'd love to hear from any one of you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we have a banking.
Wait.
Yeah.
Where's the mic?
Wait, here comes a microphone.
One clear example of effect of sanctions in Tajikistan, from what I know, is that our banks used to have their correspondent accounts in USD through the Russian banks. And since most of the banks on that list became sanctioned, it was a problem for some time to do USD transfer from and to Tajikistan. I don't know how they solved this problem by now, but this was a big challenge for our banks.
Yeah. Others? How about
from my-
Kyrgyz business folks?
Yes. From my experience, sanction brings more.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah,
Not
my name is
everyone knows everyone.
Ilgar. I'm from Azerbaijan. From my own business, sanction to Russia brings more opportunity to surrounding countries, but war with Ukraine brings more problems. And I feel it in my own business.
Very interesting. Yes, over here.
I'll introduce myself, Zarina from Kyrgyzstan. From what we've been, you gotta understand that Kyrgyzstan is a landlocked country, so we don't have this access to sea or anything like that. So anything that comes to Kyrgyzstan usually comes by land. Most of the products that were imported from Europe used to come through Russia back in the days, and having closed borders now between Europe and Russia created a lot of issues for businesses that have been importing goods from Europe. And last time when I've been talking to our business community, especially the ones that import goods, construction materials and everything else, they said the price for construction materials, first of all, it's been very challenging now to bring anything from Europe, because now they have to come up with a different route around Russia that would take a longer time. Price-wise, it goes much higher. And now they're thinking how relevant it would be even to import goods from Europe. And they would stick, most likely they would be stuck, actually, not stick, stuck with either Russian products, because we are a part of the Eurasian Customs Union, and they would be stuck with the Chinese, for instance, materials. So in that sense, business has been struggling. Sanctions were not directly, let's say, aimed at us, but just the fact that we are so dependent traffic-wise or transportation-wise or logistically by Russia, it has been affecting all the goods imported into the country.
So this is a collateral damage to Russia by Russia that is felt that impacts you.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's not because there's a sanction against European toothpaste in.
Not yet that.
Not yet, okay. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Arhan from Azerbaijan. I would like not to talk about Azerbaijan rather than the topic you mentioned about a lot of will be controls over the technology and innovations. What I feel these days, I've recently been at Cisco conference in Las Vegas. These guys are now doing a lot of control if the technology will be sold at the end of the day to Russia or not. It takes months sometimes. For the production, any servers from Cisco, it takes 355 days. This is the regular lead time for the Cisco products, while the Huawei is doing everything in 3 months. What I feel is now America is losing the innovation market to Asian countries, especially to China and India. This is another challenge that will be a huge topic in the coming days. So Asia, India are taking over the innovation market. That will be another circumstance out of this war in Ukraine.
Further, yes, please. Over here. Oh.
Yeah, Fidan was there, yeah.
1, 2, 3.
All right. So thank you very much. I'm Fidan Hussainli. I'm a fellow from Azerbaijan. And my question is a bit of a general one, maybe. Can any of the experts in the panel can foresee the situation where these sanctions can be against Russia can be lifted? Because we see now, and the situation stays the same. Because what we see now, the gross and huge and serious economic repercussions that the European countries are facing, and when you read Russian officials and everything, they're 100% sure that they can sustain the sanctions and that they can make the European countries, including US, lift them, because what we have now, sanctions were imposed against Venezuela, North Korea, and Iran, but never, ever the result of the sanctions were so high and serious as it is now. So we can expect riots in Europe, or, I don't know, shortages of electricity, food, everything all over the world. So can you foresee the situation that the sanctions are lifted and the situation in Ukraine stays almost the same? Thank you.
Thank you. And up here, anyone want to comment on that? Or shall we hear several more?
Oh, we can collect it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on your question on how the sanctions impacted Eurasian Economic Union members, Armenia, obviously. I think I agree with some of the colleagues that any situation, even such a horrible pandemic like COVID-19, it brought its challenges but also opportunities. So we are seeing both positive and negative sides. To be moral, I will say negative sides. And I think that our Ministry of Economy is now doing a comprehensive study to understand how it impacts the economic situation in Armenia and what we lose and what we gain in this situation. But I think that what all of us in Armenia noticed immediately after the sanctions were imposed is that the real estate prices in Armenia skyrocketed because a lot of Russians moved into Armenia. And I'm talking about intelligent part of the population employed by international companies, mostly in IT. So basically, it is an opportunity for Armenia and for the Ministry of Economy to think how to create more favorable tax regimes for those companies to stay in Armenia. Because this is Fortune 500 companies, very progressive young people, and who also want to stay in Armenia because they say that Armenia is democratic. So we don't want to go back to the autocratic rule because as a head of the Chamber of Commerce, I've met with some of the Russian businesses who are in Armenia. Another negative impact is that because these people are getting their salaries in dollars, there was an influx of dollars in our economy. The dram, the Armenian national currency, it became stronger. So it requires an effort on behalf of the central bank to balance the exchange rate now, and it affects some of our trade portfolio, both again in positive and negative ways. So I think in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that yes, what is happening probably should not be happening, and this is not right. But again, I think that besides the challenges, we can use the opportunities in some of our countries of this situation. Short term or long term, time will show.
Thank you. And then behind you and back,
Nargis.
and then over here.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Nargis from Tajikistan, and I wanted to ask a few questions. Actually, one on the dislocation of the routes. Now in Tajikistan, we see that, I don't know, maybe it's my opinion, but we see that we kind of now shifting from exporting to Europe, mostly exporting to India, Pakistan, and other countries. So I don't know whether we actually need WTO now. One question, and another one, you were mentioning a projection with the gas pipeline, right? That it stopped working now, and Europe just understood it now. So can you give us some more projection? So we kind of plan also in Central Asia how to cope. And on the opportunities, I think in Tajikistan, we actually see that now we can really explore these 5 bridges we have with Afghanistan and channel the trade to that direction with the huge population which live in these areas, right? And what do you think on that?
One more. Right here, sorry. We have to have 2 more.
We have 2 more, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's the second row. He was up before you. Yes.
Yeah. This is a comment/question, maybe a somewhat of a speculation. So, Mr. Farrukh again. Oh, by the way, my name is Fred. I'm from Philly. I was born in Uzbekistan. You mentioned something about aviation industry. As a former aviation professional with American Airlines, I'm aware of the airplanes such as Airbus, Boeing, they have to go through all these checks, A, B, C, D, E, depending on the letter, equals the depth of the check. So if I'm not mistaken, Boeing and Airbus, they revoked the licenses from the MROs. And so now these airplanes can't go through the certification, so which forces them, I'm assuming, to go to Kazakhstan or maybe even Uzbekistan techniques. And if I'm not mistaken, about a week ago, I've read that Kazakhstan kind of refused that deal. So I'm not sure if this is an opportunity for Uzbekistan, for example, to service these aircraft. If not, so yeah, what's your thought on that?
Fine, okay, one more here, and then we're, sir, I'm sorry, in back.
Yeah.
I'm lost.
Yes.
Me? Oh, okay. No, I just wanted
Sabir,
to...
please.
Sobir Kurbanov, Center for International Private Enterprise. To your questions on how businesses feel about the sanctions, just wanted to give a quick update. In our work with the business associations in Central Asia, we kind of supported the various surveys among the businesses, perception surveys, how they feel about the sanctions. Clearly lots of uncertainty, lots of disruptions, and one funny story we just want to tell about the head of Coca-Cola Tajikistan, a member of Amcham Tajikistan Association. He complained, I cannot get sugar from anywhere, so I have to switch to Coke Zero. That's probably more healthier. So they cannot produce a Coke with sugar because there is no sugar available coming from Russia or elsewhere. So it just kind of illustrates all sorts of severe disruptions, logistical disruptions, availability for all these value chains, production, looking for new markets, which is very challenging in the business when companies always connect with Russia and with Ukraine or the traditional markets. I don't know much about the alternative markets in East Asia because the region was kind of disconnected for 70 years. And a quick comment to what Farrukh just mentioned. Let's not forget about the opportunities to enhance the regional cooperation in Central Asia, in Caucasus, kind of localize these supply chains, they bring businesses together, women businesses, kind of small traders, open the borders, remove all these kind of barriers to trade and marketing. So that would kind of be a good way to kind of deal with the sanctions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let me now, okay, how can we not?
I will try to make it quick, but in terms of challenges or opportunities, for those countries that are exporting countries, especially oil and gas, we've seen a lot of opportunities, let's say in terms of Azerbaijan, because the price going up. But let's put it another way. Yes, the prices of gas and other stuff are high. I've been trading for the last few months these fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, which is raw materials, natural gas. So the price went up from a few $100s to $980 per ton. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a great opportunity for countries as ours, but let's put it in the terms of agriculture. And this is one of the most used fertilizers, and everyone has to buy. The European plants collapsed, they couldn't produce it, but in the long run, yeah, those countries are benefiting, but all the prices for agricultural products are going up all around the world. Yeah. So that's another thing. Let's think another way. Those Middle Eastern countries that are getting richer and richer, those are some of the countries that have been claimed to be supporting high radical groups and all these things. Let's think what's going to happen when they get more greedy and they don't want these things to stop. And they make another conditions in other parts of the world.
Thank you.
But it's another question, why not?
Final comments? Jeffrey.
Well, this was fascinating for me to learn from all of your experience. I can't answer all the questions that have been raised, but let me just focus on 2 points, 2 quick points. First is on the durability of the sanctions. For some sectors, they're going to be a part of life for a long time to come, high tech. And that's going to constrain and limit who you can do business with, unless you want to be subject to the sanctions yourself. Where there is likely to be some relaxation is in the financial sanctions that indirectly put a cloud or limit your ability to execute transactions across a range of products. Once there is a resolution of the conflict in Ukraine, then there is scope for some relaxation of the financial sanctions. But not against those that are on the sanctions list, and those that are on the sanctions list will stay there who are directly related to the military or have been involved in the crisis, in the invasion. So I think you can work around that there is room for relaxation and opportunity, but it's still going to be a medium to long-term problem. The second point, there was a question about China taking over and basically making Russia whole. The firms that are in China that have the ability to sell to Russia because they're already under U.S. sanction, like Huawei, do not have the capabilities that Western firms have to supply to Russia. So that is going to be a continued focus where Russia falls further and further behind the West because of the lack of access to world-class or even second world-class equipment. And I think that's going to be limited. A lot of Chinese firms will not buck the sanctions because the European and U.S. market is much more important to them than doing business with a small economy like Russia. And India, while they cheat, will get caught, and they can't afford to get caught. So I don't think there will be massive sanctions evasion there either.
Thank you very much. Farrukh.
You know, when I was coming to this panel, I expected that we would be talking more about challenges and a bit of opportunities. But what struck me, that with one question, Dr. Starr turned things upside down. So that like we are mostly talking about opportunities, 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 as if something's good, totally good happening, like sanctions, yay, like, you know, throw a party. It's actually an interesting phenomenon, and it shows actually the level of optimism in the audience, which is a great thing. And we're not that much pessimistic about these kind of things. Coming to question, Mr. Yuldashev, your question actually, yes, it's an opportunity, but we should understand that it also heavily binds to political will. So if there is no political will, here the private sector itself cannot handle the situation.
Yeah.
So that's why whether the governments will wear this kind of cautiousness lens and not step in and step up, or they prefer actually to roll the dice, you know, and grab this opportunity, that's an open question. But unfortunately, this issue is directly connected, while it's being, I still believe it's a low-hanging fruit, because you yourself mentioned these ABC checks, and Russia already declared that they would be dismantling some planes in order to use them as a kind of spare part for their planes, yeah. Emil, brilliant question, brilliant observation. Agriculture is a big thing, and it's getting even bigger. It's getting even bigger, and but more important, it's much more important now to think about diversification as well. Because if it all goes to Russia, and then, like, you know, something changes in Russia, and we live in a wild world where things may change, then you'll be, like, you know, in trouble, because you will have to drastically find some other markets for your perishable products. And for that point, you really have to have some kind of plan B, where you think, like, you know, where else you can actually send this. And then the final one, the point from Fidan, I don't see this coming in foreseeable future, unfortunately. But still, it's about like how you approach this issue and what you gain from that. Sorry.
Aibek.
Thank you. Yes, we have some challenge opportunities on the sanction against Russia, and we are Central Asian countries, neighbors, must understand, and we have to stop our disputes and work together to do cooperation together, to access to the sea, to construct new railways from the China to Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and European countries. So right now we are using our railway logistics through the Georgia to access the sea, Black Sea. We have a very close countries to be accessed to the sea through Afghanistan and Pakistan. Unfortunately, the situation in Afghanistan doesn't give us a chance to be accessed to the sea. That's why from the last couple of years, Kyrgyzstan started work together with our neighbors, Uzbekistan, and we are discussing to start construction railway from China, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and to build new hydropower station together with Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. So right now we have a chance to be together, CAMCA countries and the special Central Asian countries, to take opportunity from this time.
Ladies and gentlemen, I came into this hall today expecting a rather bureaucratic discussion of sanctions, and frankly, I wasn't very excited about it. At the end of this discussion, this is really gold, what we're hearing. Why? Because sanctions are, they're one act. They are imposed, and then you figure out what you do with them, and that's that. And that might be a huge problem in some countries, a lesser problem in others, but it's done. It's over. But the second question, the question of the fate of the Russian economy as a whole, separate from, well, including, but beyond sanctions, and its impact of that change on all of the CAMCA countries. This is absolutely important stuff. And I hope, among other things, that maybe someone in the room or someone, a CAMCA member of this wonderful mafia who isn't here, might take this up as a research project. What has been the impact, the scale, and then the impact of changes in the Russian economy in Central Asia, the Caucasus, Mongolia, Afghanistan? What has been the actual impact, and how are people dealing with it? I mean, the idea that all of you have expressed, that this does present opportunities. This is important stuff, and I hope CAMCA can come up with some solid research on this and not just talk.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
There he is.